Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of academic research and find out what it really takes for a simple idea to survive the journey and actually get published.
To really get how science happens, you first have to understand the one single massive pressure that every single researcher is under. It's kind of the unwritten rule of the game, and it shapes everything that follows.
It all boils down to this one very famous phrase, publish or perish. And believe me, this isn't just some catchy saying. It is the absolute reality for academics. Your career, your funding, even keeping your job, it all comes down to how many papers you can get your name on.
It is a total pressure cooker. You've got researchers fighting tooth and nail for a really small pot of money and a handful of jobs. And the people giving out the money, they have incredibly high standards. The whole system just ends up rewarding the number of papers you publish, not always how good they are. So all that intense pressure, well, it can push some researchers into some ethically murky territory. It leads them to a practice with a pretty unforgettable name, salami slicing. So, what on earth is it? Well, salami slicing is basically when a researcher takes one really good, solid study and just chops it up into the thinnest possible pieces, publishing each little slice as its own paper. The goal here isn't to share knowledge better. It's all about jacking up that publication count. And this is where it all gets kind of weird and complicated. See, publishing the exact same paper twice, that's called duplicate publication, is a huge no-no. Everybody agrees it's wrong. But salami slicing, that lives in this much foggier ethical space. It's not totally clear-cut cheating. One source just calls it ethically incongruous. It's weird. And this confusion, you can see it in the actual rules. A recent study looked at over 200 scientific journals and found that, almost half of them had clear rules against publishing the same paper twice. But only a measly 13% had any kind of rule about salami slicing. There just aren't any clear road signs here.
Okay, so with all this pressure and all these temptations, how do researchers do the right thing and still get published? Well, it all comes down to having a really, really good strategy.
You know what they say, the best defense is a good offense. So instead of just artificially chopping up one idea, a smart research strategy is all about finding several legitimate gaps in what we already know. Each new paper then tries to fill one of those specific gaps, which justifies it being its own separate piece of work.
And this isn't just some random idea. Researchers actually have frameworks for this. This model here shows 7 main types of research gaps. So, for example, a population gap could be taking something we know is true for one group and seeing if it's true for another. Or a methodological gap might be using a brand new tool to look at an old question again. By building their work around these different gaps, a researcher can get multiple totally valid papers out of one big project, without ever having to slice a single salami.
All right, so even if you have the perfect strategy, your paper is not in the clear. Not by a long shot. Once it's written and sent off, it enters the most nerve-wracking and, frankly, brutal stage of its entire life, peer review. This is where other experts try their absolute best to find every single flaw in your work.
To show you just how intense this can get, we're going to walk through the actual feedback a reviewer left on a real paper. This paper was making some pretty wild claims, and let's just say the reviewer was not convinced.
Oof. The review starts off rough. And you got to remember, this wasn't the first attempt, it was a revision. The reviewer is basically saying right out of the gate, you didn't fix the biggest problems I told you about last time.
And then comes this absolute gut punch, an artifact of the analysis. What that means is the reviewer is saying the amazing discovery in the paper isn't real. It's just a ghost, a mirage created by a broken scientific method.
So what was the big flaw? Well, the reviewer actually redid the author's work and found out the computer model wasn't detecting what they thought it was. Instead, it had just learned to tell time. Seriously. Its predictions were just based on how long the experiment had been running, which is a totally useless and meaningless finding.
Then the reviewer just puts the question right back on the authors. They're basically asking, hey, your results were so perfect, so incredible. Didn't a little voice in your head say, maybe this is too good to be true? It's a great point. Your first critic should always be yourself.
So, with a fatal flaw like that uncovered during peer review, the paper was rejected. The system, as tough as it was, actually worked. It stopped bad science from getting out into the world.
This whole wild ride, from that initial pressure to publish all the way to a brutal peer review rejection, it really just shows you why doing good, trustworthy science is so incredibly hard. So let's just quickly recap what we've learned here.
First, the pressure is just immense. The whole system is set up to reward quantity. Second, the ethics can get super complicated and blurry. Third, having a solid strategy based on filling real knowledge gaps is absolutely essential. And finally, that critical and sometimes really painful peer review process is the firewall that catches mistakes.
But there was a silver lining here. In the final comments, the reviewer actually praised the authors for one really important thing. They made all of their data public, and the reviewer said straight up, without that transparency, that fatal flaw would have never been found. It's just this powerful argument for open science.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big, tough question. This whole process is a constant balancing act, isn't it? It's a struggle between the pressures of a career and the real mission of science. In a system that's always screaming for more, how do we protect the slow, difficult, and incredibly important quest for truth? That really is the biggest challenge of all.